everyone. Welcome back to the Peak Sports Psychiatry Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at 43 Degrees Sports, a company that's actually revolutionizing post-game recovery. If you've ever thrown your gear into a bag and forgotten about it, you know the smell I'm talking about. 43 Degrees Sports created a temperature-controlled hockey bag that kills up to 96% of harmful bacteria. No chemicals, no noise, no hassle. It's clean gear ready to perform. Check them out at 43degreesports.com and see why hockey's dirtiest secret just met its match. Welcome back to the Peak Sports Psychiatry Podcast, where we explore the intersection of mental health, performance, and the culture of sport. Quick audible today, Tommy's out of the lineup, so I'm thrilled to have Tim Maher jumping in to co-host with me.
Always happy to jump in.
So sports shape culture, and culture shapes how we talk about mental health. Today, we're sitting down with someone who lives right at that intersection.
And for me, this one's personal. I've known Celia since high school, and I've watched her take an elite athlete mindset into some of the most influential rooms in sports media.
She's helped shape how millions of people experience sports, not just what we watch, but how stories are told.
Celia Kohl, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at Versant. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here.
So, Celia, we always start with the athlete story. You were a junior national team rower and a 4-year varsity athlete at Harvard. How did sport shape who you are today?
Yeah, it's been a huge part of building who I am today, and something that I, to this day continue to believe is a massive part of my identity. I think, for any athlete, when you're competing, no matter at what level, it's just so prevalent in your life day to day that you can't ignore it. And what I've found is that it's really helped shape my key pillars of my life: strong work ethic, time management, and routine, probably being the three most impactful. I think those really impact me on both a personal life, level, but also in work today. And, as I think I've kind of mentioned to you, Tim, probably all the way back to high school, I always wanted to work in sports. That was something that was just a huge passion of mine. And I was fortunate enough to find that path, a large part due to the people that I met along the way. And so it has shaped me tremendously from a work perspective. I think more broadly, as an athlete, I was always really passionate about, no matter what sport I was working in, whether it was basketball or rowing or, lacrosse or field hockey at younger ages. I just was always so passionate about it. And so today, I feel like that passion shines through. Again, in work and in personal life and family and friends. It's been tremendously impactful. And then finally, hard to ignore the network that, being an athlete brings to you. And so being a part of sport from the time that I was a kid has helped me create relationships that have really lasted throughout my entire life. And I find that every month that goes by, I create a new relationship or make a new friend, largely in part due to my experience, both as an athlete, but also working in sports today.
Yeah, you said a lot of things there that I agree with. I mean, the sports participation, it's not the sport itself, but just being on the team creates a sense of community, and that fosters relationships that can last a lifetime. And also, the fact that athletes tend to make the best leaders in a lot of ways, especially in business. And so you're living proof of that, which is amazing. I want to ask more about the rowing, because I think that's just fascinating, and what really took you a long way. So it's one of the most mentally demanding endurance sports that there is. What did it teach you about pressure and resilience?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say that pressure and resilience were, two of the things that really were the biggest factors in my experience as a rower. I think if you learn about the sport itself, it boils down to one thing, which is putting yourself through as much pain as possible while holding on for dear life. And any rower will resonate with that. Marathon runners feel it when they hit the wall. Basketball players feel it when they're kind of hitting towards the end of the game and your legs are starting to go out. But at the end of the day with rowing, you hit that wall and you have that feeling pretty much 15, 20% into a race. And you just have to hold on. And so what I've found is there are two things. I think rowers understand that you kind of have to treat pain as a part of the process. You don't feel the pain and stop. You feel it and you keep pushing through, because you can't stop. Because if you do stop, the boat stops. So there is no choice. And so what I have found is, I remember as a rower, you're breathing hard, your knees are shaking, your arms want to fall off, but there's no other choice, because otherwise you'd let your team down. So I think what that really has done is taught me in life that discomfort is not failure. discomfort is a part of the process and it makes you better. It makes you better for many reasons, but because you have no option, you just learn to live with it and it really kind of brings you a long way. So that was the first thing. And then I'd say the second thing is that, and I mentioned this a little bit, but the pressure is shared. It's not individual.
Yeah.
You are all going through it together. It's not solo. And so when you learn to stay strong and kind of stay steady, that's when the boat is at its best and that's when you go fastest. And so in any work, experience or personal experience, when you're working with other people or working through family stuff or stuff with your friends, the best path is to keep it going steady. Don't give up. You're going through it with those same people. Don't rock the boat. And it'll bring you a long way.
I mean, it has to be one of the most in sync sports that there is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like just by design. And so there's like a diffusion of responsibility, which we've talked about in the past on this podcast, which when something's not going well at the end of the race, it's not just on you.
Yep.
It's kind of a shared thing. Whereas if it's a solo sport, it can be a lot more stressful. That being said, also when things are going really well, you have a team to celebrate with, which is wonderful.
Well, and I think, sorry, just to throw in one last thing, a lot of people, I got asked this my entire career as a rower. Everybody's like, it just looks so graceful. Like you look so lovely from
But it
the
does.
floor. Like, are you having fun? You're so in sync. And I think the thing is that like nobody knows how much pain you're in because we're forced to internalize it. And I think that that's another huge lesson in life and in work, is that there is nothing more powerful in a work situation when things start to escalate and people are getting high pressure and people are getting, mad at each other or pissed or whatever, and you're calm. I think there's something to be said for the power as a leader when you're in the room and you keep your cool. And that's a lot of what rowing was.
I mean, that's incredibly valuable as a leader. Getting too emotional, I've definitely dealt with some directors, managers, or whatever in the past. And I mean, even you, Mark, as a clinician, you can't be emotional when you're sharing really any news, good news, bad news. You got to be able to keep that on the back burner.
Well, one of the things we teach the patients we work with is emotion surfing. As waves come in, you have to kind of learn how to surf because stuff will keep coming in. So you have to learn how to ride with it. But what you described with rowing is that like you just need to keep going forward. So it's not powering through, but it's learning resilience in that you're all in this together. So I do want to make sure that there's a difference that's discussed here. And it's not that you just deal with it and power through and just internalize your emotions. I think it's a different way that you were talking about internalization there.
Yep.
It's like that you're building up that resilience. You can handle it because you are a member of a group. And at the end of it, you're a family. So I think that's great. Last little thing specifically about mental health. When you were doing rowing at the time, did you ever actually think about mental health explicitly, or did that understanding come later? Because I know you were a psychology major in college, right?
I was. And I think the interesting thing, and I would actually probably blanket this a little bit to kind of college athletes in general, and then I'll bring it back to my personal experience. I think, people forget that college freshmen are like 17, 18 years old. And it's this wild time in your life where you're leaving home for the first time. You're living on your own schedule. Like you're being told where to be in practice, but, no one is necessarily, going to wake you up. And you're also trying to make friends. You're trying to like find your way through life. And that's emotionally really grueling. Like it is a really hard time. And I think not enough people talk about how hard it is your freshman year. I think for anyone, but for college athletes, you're balancing a lot. And so it's a huge weight on your shoulders. And I think for a lot of people, an emotional burden that you're feeling for the first time in your life. And so I think you almost, at least my experience was, I didn't really have time to think about it. I almost found like it kind of a couple years later, I was like, wow, like I kind of think I went through a really tough time my freshman fall adjusting to this. So my answer to you, Mark, would be that I think it took a little bit of time to figure it out. I think that once I got to my, end of my sophomore, junior, senior year, it became more apparent that I was going through a big adjustment phase. And I think a lot of people do. I think it took a little bit of time. What I would add is that I think the adjustment period that happens in freshman year, a lot of times for college athletes, is going from being the big fish in the small pond in high school, where you are the top dog, you are the number one, number two, number three on the field or in the boat, to going to a team of people who were all that in high school. They were all the top dog. And I think, again, emotionally adjusting to that is hard because you're getting different feedback. Like you might be getting different types of feedback than you got when you were a senior in high school. And I think all that kind of comes together. And I think it just proves that like that adjustment is really hard and you're not necessarily thinking about how hard it is on you, but it's something that I think is really important that is hopefully being vocalized more now and that more resources are being put towards it. Because I personally look back, I'm not sure that there were really too many resources that I was aware of at the time.
I mean, the adjustment to college is hard for anyone, much less someone who's going to a very large D1 program to play at the highest level. I think that's the reason why it's so powerful to have pre-orientation trips or team building exercises to sort of have a soft landing for these folks that are coming out of high school, having been big fish in a small pond, so that they feel like there's a sense of community immediately. And I think the best coaches and staff do that. I mean, I felt the same way when I was going to medical school. I mean, I looked around the room and everybody in my class, they'd all been the top in their high school or colleges or whatever. And we're all competing against each other. And same with like in Major League Baseball, everybody on that team had been the best player on their team on every single team they've ever been on until that level. And then if they're hitting 200, they're viewed as not playing very well or being very good, but no, they are damn good at their sport. So anyway, thank you for that. That was really helpful. Tim?
I mean, you've touched on this a little bit already, but when you look back on, what parts of the athlete identity have stayed with you most, I'd be interested to learn about that. But also, like, what parts of the athlete identity do you think have evolved in your professional career the most?
I would say probably the few areas that, the biggest parts of my life today that were such a huge part of my life when I was really kind of functioning as an elite athlete were first and foremost being a part of a team. I think that is just something that never leaves you. Once you've been a part of a team at whatever level athlete you are, you understand what it's like to be working together towards something with other people, and you realize how cool it is and how special it is. And I take that with me every single day in work. I mean, I believe that my team at work is a family. We are all working towards goals together, and it's pretty freaking cool when like you're all getting there together and it's fun. Like we all work a ton. Work should be fun. You should be with people that, you're enjoying with. You're Monday morning high-fiving, how was the weekend, whatever it is. Like that is something that will never leave me, no matter what, is being a part of a team and really viewing life as, a team, basically a team, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, or whether it's your work colleagues. I think the second thing that's really important, and I think quite frankly is a really interesting area when you're talking about mental health, is taking coaching. I think that when you're young and going back to what we were talking about being a freshman, sometimes you don't want, you're kind of like, oh no, I don't need the coaching. Like I got it. I've got it figured out. But you realize that coaches are there to help you. And like they're literally hired to help you. And so when you're this stubborn 18-year-old, you're like, fuck it. Like I don't want that. And so I think it's really interesting how that evolves because you build a relationship with your coach and you realize, okay, they're going to help me get better, and you get the egos past you. But I think even now, like in my career, I look to my boss. I'm like, what can we be doing better? What can I be doing better? How can I be a better manager? And that's something that I'll never give up on. Parents, like, again, there was a time in my life where my parents knew nothing and I knew everything, right? And so now I still go to my parents. I call them up. Hey, I need help with this. That I believe you can never give up on. Like coaches are just tremendous. And I'm sure we'll talk a little about, how that plays into mental health too when it comes to taking help and finding resources. People are there to help for a reason. And I think that's really important. And then I think the third thing, which probably comes out a little too often, is just sheer competitiveness. Like that part of me is just never going to go away. I love being an athlete. I like beating people. I like beating myself. That's why I love golf. You could just play against your hand. Be like, I got to beat my handicap. Like that will never go away. So those I would say are the most that stay with me. The two that have evolved, my physical endurance. I don't think I could run a Harvard Stadium right now if I tried. Might even be able to get up a few, not sure. I still work out, not the same. That just has evolved. And then the second thing I would say is that I think what has evolved for me is I think when I was younger, I had an uncertain kind of awareness of what my priorities really were and how to balance them. I think that's something you really learn once you get into the working world. When you're in college, you're balancing partying and friends and being an athlete. Like it's very hard. I think once you get later on in life and you start working and you start building a family or whatever it is, you learn about your priorities. And that's something that I think in me has really evolved.
Well, I can definitely vouch that your competitive spirit has not changed.
God, I'm already terrified to go on the golf course with her, Tim.
Anytime you want. I told you, I know we were maybe going to do this post golf, but we'll find a time.
I mean, I've seen her play paddle tennis,
Yeah.
and like, I don't know if I can handle 18.
But my favorite saying is, if you ever need a fourth. So for anyone listening, if you ever need a fourth, you call me.
Yeah, well, I mean, you did say 9 times out of 10, if golf's involved, you'll get on a plane.
I will. Yep. I got a lot of miles built up.
Be careful what you say. Well, so you had a lot of themes in there, which was like the lessons you learned in college, the being on a team aspect, all of that experience really helped you in the working world. And it sounds like it's now evolved with where you are in your career, and even with your boss now, even though I know you're very high up at Versant. So that team-based sort of endurance grind that you experienced at a really high level is wonderful. But now you've sort of pivoted to a very demanding individual sport in golf, which I want to hear kind of about like your involvement with that. I know you've been at NBC Sports. So I kind of want to hear the journey.
Before we get into that, would it be helpful for you to give the listeners a little snapshot of what you do for work, including your time at NBC Universal and what you're currently doing at Versant?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all kind of ties together. When I look at my path to where I am today, I think there are a few key, parts of the paths. I think first and foremost, I think I might have mentioned this, but I always wanted to work in sports. It was a passion of mine. My mom worked in sports. She worked on the Olympics. She worked for various companies. And I was always inspired by her. She was always a huge role model of mine. And I think as I got older, and by older, I mean once I got into kind of high school and college and started to understand that there was a business side to sports, that was really what I kind of honed in on, was that, it's one thing to say you want to work in sports, but it's good to know like kind of within sports what you want to do. And so I started to kind of get fascinated by what was going on in the media landscape and how did the kind of business of sports kind of come together. And so when I was a junior in college, I will never forget, all my friends were going through investment banking, consulting, case studies, processes. And I was like, man, I would really love to get into the business of sports. I ended up meeting someone through rowing at a work event who I'm thankful to this day, my first boss ever, hired me as an intern for the London Olympics for NBC.
Cool.
And I met him at a rowing dinner. I probably had a few glasses of wine and I was like, NBC Sports is like my dream company. And flash forward, he hired me. I worked as an intern in production management, which was awesome and such an amazing experience. I was like, this is where I want to work. I was like, this is awesome. The culture is incredible. The Olympics are sick. Like, this is fantastic.
Very timely, this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. As we were in the middle of the Olympics. And it could not have been a cooler experience. And I ended up getting hired full time after I graduated to do the same thing for the Sochi Olympics. And it was, honestly, I loved it. But by the time I got to the end of it, I realized, okay, this is the company, this is the family, this is the group that I love, but I really want to get back to that business side of things. So that's when I made the transition into kind of strategy and business development, which has really been my core, my entire path. And it wasn't that I didn't love the production piece, because actually what was really cool was you learned what was going on behind the camera and you got to be a part of that family that was working 20 hours a day for the Olympics, 20 days straight. And it was really cool, but I was ready for that next step. So I made the transition. I worked primarily in sports, in strategy and business development for NBC for 10 years. By the end of my career, I was also overseeing entertainment as well, but I'd say 80% of my job was focused on NBC Sports. And my time there our team was primarily doing all of our media rights strategy, doing all the internal, call it quarterbacking of any of our media rights processes. So Sunday Night Football renewal, Big Ten acquisition, we just did the NBA acquisition, pretty much everything from those big properties down to even the smaller properties that were exclusive to streaming. So we worked on all those properties. It was awesome. And then the opportunity presented itself at the end of 2024 to move to Versant. And for those listening who haven't heard what Versant is, it's a spinoff company. Comcast NBCU spun out 11 assets into a brand new company that just went public January 5th. It is a mix of sports news, entertainment, direct-to-consumer properties. And so honestly, I made the jump largely because it was an opportunity to work on something new. different priorities than NBCU, but I knew the culture was going to carry over because the culture at NBCU was so special. And so now I'm in this new role where I oversee not just sports, but I oversee kind of all the assets for the company, which has been really awesome too. Never thought I'd work in news. It's fun.
Never say never.
But it has been awesome, which I think in turn has made me better at my sports job too, just understanding the entire media landscape. So that's where I am now. Priorities are a little different based on the different verticals within the company, but it's been tremendous. I've been in the role for a little over a year now. I miss my friends and, my NBCU kind of core people very dearly, many of which are still there. But a group did come over to Versant. And so, as I mentioned, the culture's still there. It's still got that same vibe as it did at NBC Sports. And I'm excited for what's ahead. We've got a lot to work through. We have a lot to prove in our first few years as a public company, but it has been tremendous.
I mean, you started with the Olympics production where storytelling is front and center. When did it click for you that sports media isn't just entertainment, it's a cultural force?
Yeah, honestly, I think it was my first Olympics experience because what's more of a cultural force than the
Yeah.
Olympics? You're bringing together the best athletes from all around the world. I always have to remind myself of that when I'm sitting down watching the Olympics. I sat down and I was watching some of the speed skating. I was like, these people are literally the best athletes in their sport in the world. I'm not sure how much cooler that gets. And they're all there together in a sick location. And so I honestly think it was that experience that I had in production where I was like, wow, like sports is so much more than just like, it's awesome to watch on TV. It's just also really a huge cultural impact. And so that's something that I've brought with me. And I've worked on a lot of different sports, on football, on hockey, on college sports, everything. And they've all evolved. But it is just amazing how, it is so much more than just sitting down and watching. It is about a community. It is about what's going on in the world around you. It is about being with friends. It's just, there are so many aspects to it. And luckily it happened early in my career. And I think that's part of what fueled my passion to stay in sports and to get to where I am today.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier was just like, you have these top athletes in their sport and then a sick location doing what they love. I've been thoroughly enjoying watching curling every morning in bed with my son. Well, I'll put it on my phone and he's 3. So he wants to cuddle or whatever and watch the video on my phone. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, hold up. This is like grown up like cornhole, but like on ice. This is like an everyman sports, but these are people who practice this all the time. This is It's so relatable. It's not just like downhill skiing. Those people terrify me. There's all kinds of sports that are represented, which is, I think, amazing. But what I think really makes the Olympics super cool are the stories behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of learn about the athletes. Have you learned from the media landscape? Was there a moment where you realized the way that stories are told actually shapes how people think about athletes?
Yeah, I think in my experience working on the Olympics, there were some specific highlight clips that I remember we did that went super viral. There was actually one ridiculous one that ended up getting all this crazy press, and it was called Bodies in Motion, and it was really egregious, and it was slow-mos of people beach volleyball and everything. And it was this really funny thing, but I think it was the first time that things were going so so viral. Today things go viral in a different way.
Like this episode. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to go viral, right? Let's throw it up there with Bodies in Motion on YouTube.
Absolutely.
But I remember learning about the impact of the media and the impact it has on storytelling through that first job, partially because I'll never forget part of my job was to go through all the transcripts of all the pre-Olympic videos that we did with all the top athletes, where we were asking them ridiculous stuff. We were asking them about their top moments. They were crying, they were laughing, they had their pets on set and everything like this. But what NBC was doing was creating all this content that could then be used. And it was so cool because I was seeing these athletes in a way that you just would never see. And then what was really cool was to see them all made into these amazing videos that told the story of how the athletes got to where they were and, who their parents were and where they grew up. And I remember that was a moment where I was like, wow, media and sports media and production is so cool because now going into the Olympics, all these consumers are going to really understand these athletes in a way that they would not have if you were just watching them in a suit, fly 90 miles an hour down the hill. And I think that was a moment where I was like, this is really, really powerful.
Yeah. The Korda family, like the Peter Korda having been the tennis player and then just producing all these professional athlete kids is exactly like, who are the parents? Anyway, go ahead, Tim.
Did being a former athlete change how you experience those production and storytelling environments?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there were times where I resonated and I was like, wow, like that, if someone talked about like a reason for getting into a sport or somebody talked about like their biggest mentors or their biggest influences, I was like, wow, I can relate to that because I've been through, like, I have mentors. I have reasons why I got into sports. I mean, everybody does, but I think that's what's so cool about, sports and media in general is the ability to relate to people who you've never met in your life and you're just watching them dominate and you're like, wow, that's really cool. And I think, when athletes come out and say that they're experiencing something, whether good or bad, and you relate to them, I think there's something really special about that.
That's such an amazing experience, and I definitely can relate to that. I even remember when Apollo Anton was just going, viral for the time. I think he's retired for at least 15 years now, but just like how I wanted to see every single time he was on the ice. Obviously you've been involved with a number of Olympics, whether it's winter or summer. Is there any specific Olympic experience that really stands out to you? Because I know obviously we've gone through a pandemic, we've gone through all
Mhm.
these different things and you were working through all of that. And sometimes there are external influences that are really impacting the day to day of the games. So would you be able to speak to that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you look back over the last decade, almost every Olympics has had their own, call it, issue or something going on in the world, whether it's Zika during Rio,
Oh
or
boy.
tough conditions. You just it happens, and I think it's inevitable. I hate to say that it's created storylines because I don't think it is, but there's always something, right? To flip the script a little bit, I think for me the most impactful Olympics was actually 1996 when I went because my mom was working on it, and I
Cool.
was 5 or 6 years old and we were living in Atlanta for the month. That one had the bombing, right? When the bomb
Yep.
went off on the stage, my mom was there. I remember my time in Atlanta, but that didn't impact me from a work perspective at the time. But from a personal perspective, like that's when I started to feel like, wow, like working in sports is so cool. And my mom had this incredible family of people that were working on the Olympics together. And I think like in the back of my mind, again, you start to kind of pick up on these things. I was like, wow, I want something like that. And I want to be a part of that. And so that was probably the most impactful for me.
So I know we're obviously friends before all of this, but it's funny you mentioned that because the Atlanta Olympics were the first ones that I remember. And it's because my parents had a friend that carried the torch for part of it. So I
Wow.
actually got to like touch the torch when I was going through Stamford,
Jeez.
Connecticut on its way down to Atlanta. And
So cool.
I mean, I was 5 ish.
Yeah.
So having that be a vivid memory through all of my years of playing sports, and that definitely resonated with me through the years. So
Yeah.
that's too funny.
Well, those were we were just starting to like really remember things, right? We were
Yeah.
5, 6 years old. We were
No.
going through it. So
I
yeah,
was
that's really cool.
I was a tad older. I had
But you aged so well.
Thanks. I remember that summer I was taking a cross country road trip with my family, and I was, well, when I was 12, 11, staying at a bunch of Holiday Inns. But the toy that you got for checking at the Holiday Inn was this little blue figurine that was playing a certain sport. And so I have a bunch of 1996 Atlanta Olympics different
That's
figurines,
pretty
which
cool.
should be behind me, but they're not. I got to go find them in a box somewhere.
That was the
But that was,
mascot.
yeah, exactly. It was the
That
mascot.
little
And
guy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like super cute. Yeah.
I have a stuffed toy somewhere that's like, we were probably like, we have to keep this thing. He had a name. I can't remember. My mom would know.
Yeah, I gave my son one from the Paris Olympics from a couple of years ago, which is
Oh,
like
fun.
apparently like a hat. Of course, my wife was like,
Yes.
"What is that? It's
Mm-hmm.
a hat with feet?" And I was like, "Yes," and it's very cute, and it sits on my son's. Anyway,
There you
whatever.
go.
Um, Tim, I think you were
Yeah,
next,
I
but
mean,
then we will
well,
keep
just to
going.
follow up on the figurine conversation, I think the only figurines I've gotten from an Olympics was when, someone that I was in grade school with, her parents went and brought back a little bunch of little koalas from Sydney. And I thought that
Okay,
was
that's cool.
pretty darn cool because you
I
could
love
pinch
it.
them and you could hang them onto
Yep.
things.
Very cool.
Not distracting at all in class, but of course I learned a lot that year. So to refocus, even though you're not deciding how individual athlete stories are covered in your day-to-day role, your work really sits upstream of all of that.
hmm
How do media right deals and structural decisions influence those kinds of stories and, how they're ultimately told?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think this is an area that, I think people don't fully kind of recognize. Like when you sit down and watch the Olympics, like you're like, wow, the production's great and you're watching everything. From my side of the business, where we're a lot more about kind of getting the deals done and then we kind of move on to the next, there is a lot that goes into what we as a media company are allowed to do from a distribution perspective. And that a lot of it comes down to highlight clips and social rights and, distribution on streaming versus cable versus broadcast. And the reason for that is as media continues to shift so much, there's a lot of concern around value protection on linear. And a lot of economics are tied up in cable networks. And you want to make sure you're maintaining exclusivity for content on the cable networks and not letting it bleed to places like social. Otherwise, it would make no sense to do a deal for linear, because if you can get all of your highlights from a game on social, why would you ever need to pay for cable if you're subscribing to cable for sports, which many people are. And so that's where I would say it's less about maybe the restrictions on like who can be featured or otherwise, but it's more about how the athletes are featured. And that is a really big part of media rights negotiations right now. Everybody is trying to drive value. There is a ton of value in sports media, but everybody's trying to protect their platforms. So it's kind of this back and forth. And for me in my career and now working in it for 11, 12 years, it's one of the most fascinating parts of the business because it shifts like every 2 to 3 years as new platforms come out, new social platforms arise. And it's something that I think everyone will be paying attention to now and into the future.
I mean, that's almost got to be like experiencing the Wild West and going out and picking your land and everything,
Yep,
trying to protect what you found.
exactly.
That's wild.
So don't worry. I mean, I have a Peacock subscription, and that's where I've been getting a lot of, where I've been watching curling. Pivoting a little bit, I do want to understand, your view here of the sports media's role in all of this, because obviously this is a mental health podcast. What do you think is sports media's role in shaping the public's understanding of athlete mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important. And to me, there are a few key factors here. One, which I just touched on a little bit when we talk about kind of different platforms, sports content is everywhere,
Yeah.
right? It is on broadcast, it is on cable, it's on streaming, it's on social, it's on YouTube, TikTok, name it, whatever you want. I don't even know what the platforms are going to be in a year. I'm sure there will be a brand new one that we've never even heard of.
Peak Sports Media. Yeah,
Yeah,
that one. Yeah,
there
yeah,
you go.
yeah.
We
Just
should
checking.
coin it today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Your upcoming streaming service. It's everywhere and everybody's consuming sports content. And it's one of, everybody will say it's just one of the hottest pieces of content out there is sports and what's going on in the sports world. So like naturally that creates massive influence. So part of that is people's interest in, the teams and the sports and everything. But part of it is people's emotional connection to the athletes. And many people idolize them. Many people are influenced by them. Many people look for inspiration or shared experience. And there's something really cool about that, feeling that connection to that athlete that's on TV who you've never met, you probably may never meet in your life, but they're talking about something and you're connecting with it. And there's something really cool about that. So from a mental health perspective, when you have this platform that has that amount of reach and that ability to instill emotional connections in people, that's powerful. And, better damn be using it in the right way. And I think that athletes, teams, organizations are figuring out the right way to do it. And now more than ever, they are hopeful. What we all hope for is improving the public perception of mental health issues or concern or things that traditionally have perhaps been a little bit more behind the curtain. And I think that's really important, as I would say right now, societal pressure, stresses, especially on younger generations, is at an all-time high. Let the fans learn about mental disorders or struggles through the lens of how they impact athletes' training or how they impact athletes in competition, not just what the definition is in the DSM-5 or what version are we on?
We're gonna go to the 6, but yeah, we're still at the
6. There you go.
5. Yeah,
So
yeah,
okay, I was right. I was a
yeah,
psych
yeah.
major in college. All right, I'd like to
Nailed
drop
it.
that in there. So okay, good to know we're still on 5, but put it through the lens of what the athletes that you are emotionally connected to. Look at how it impacts their lives. And if you can do that correctly through the platforms that these sports media companies have, I think it's really cool. And it's a really special time where it can be incredibly impactful.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. There have been a number of athletes that have, spoken out, over the past 5, 10 years. And, part one of the question, do you think we're in a better place now than we were in the past 5 to 10 years? And were there any specific athletes that really resonated with you personally in their mental health struggles and how they spoke out?
I would say I like to believe we're in a better place for everything that I just mentioned, that the power of social media is so strong that we have this incredible platform where I think there's an opportunity to help turn the narrative around from stigma to perhaps something that's inspiring or educational. And so while there are things that I think can be scary about headlines and dramatization and, people perhaps saying things that aren't factually correct, generally I tend to look at things with a glass half full. And I genuinely believe if it can be done right, we are in a better place. I feel strongly about that. In terms of a specific athlete, I don't know that I would name a specific athlete, but I would, in keeping with our theme, as everyone knows, I'm obsessed with golf. I personally think that the way that mental health has been portrayed and introduced in the golf world is the best of any of the sports. And you look at things like, these documentaries or athletes coming out and talking about it, I think twofold. One is that it's very clear anyone who's a golfer understands the impact of your mental health and your, mental thoughts on the course or whatever. That's one part of it. But I think the second is how the athletes themselves and the leagues and the media companies have worked together to fold it into the game has been tremendous.
And we've had a couple of golfs, but this is like our third golf conversation, which I think is great.
Possibly
It's a different perspective. Yeah, maybe it's fourth. But we've had Carly Hunt, who is a sports psychologist focused on golf. We've had Steve Wheatcroft, who is a former professional golfer, on talking about the player side of things. Now we're talking about the media's role in all this. So I think this really rounds it out, which is great. I think media has such a huge role with the way in which stories are told and on the language that's used. We talk about language a lot, on the power of how things are phrased to get into the public lexicon. So one of the things I have been thinking about when we were talking with you is like, how can media avoid sensationalism, like in focusing on things that are actually useful and helpful and healthy to discuss? How can they affect or use helpful tone and context? Is there training that goes into that? I'm just curious your perspective.
I think the most important thing when it comes to mental health and building it into the narrative is making sure that it's not about driving ratings. You're not using someone's mental health struggles or storyline as a way to drive higher ad revenue or try. And I'm not saying anyone is or has, but that is the biggest thing for me, is avoid the sensationalism in the sense that a media company is using it to get more eyeballs. Use it as a way to deepen the understanding of the athlete and make fans genuinely interested in tuning in. I think that is the most critical part of folding into the narrative. When it comes to the language and tone and context, think about what sports are tied to, right? Mental toughness, resilience, grit, strength. So you can choose to frame mental health as you're going against all of those, which tends to come across in a negative connotation. They're weak. They couldn't keep their resilience or whatnot. That's where it starts to get, I think, in my opinion, a little bit more into the sensationalism. I think if you turn it into more of framing that, perhaps these are people who, they're elite athletes, but they're people just like us. They have support. They have sports psychologists who, in a way, are a lot like coaches to make them better. That's where I think there's a big opportunity and where I think the framing and the tone is so critical.
Thank you. That was very helpful. I always feel really good when public figures, big athletes, come out and talk about either their mental health struggles or that they've been in therapy or that they've seen a professional and they worked on themselves. And because it sort of just continues to take some of that air out of the balloon from the stigma, that it makes it normalized to go to actually get help, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Yep.
Part of what I think media's role too is to help us switch from a reactivity phase to a being proactive. Because a lot of the time, especially we're guilty of it in medicine. I mean, mental health has always been sort of an afterthought until recently when we have conversations like this. Psychiatrists specifically have never been really engaged until after things have gotten really bad. And so we want to talk about from a preventative standpoint. So I do wonder if there's a way that media can help normalize the conversations to stop one from over medicalizing symptoms, if you will, but also to moving from just crisis only coverage to maybe prevention or just having, a story focused on, hey, the U.S. SOPC's psychological services is doing really good work. And their players are really prepared going into the Olympics. They've done the work so that they're prepared. And, if there is a crisis that comes up, they also can handle it. Does this make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And I think historically, when mental health came up, I think for not great reasons, it was almost a shock factor, right? It was kind of like, oh, we're talking about someone's anxiety or someone's depression or someone's experience with PTSD or whatever it was. And it became this like, whoa. And I almost feel like, people were kind of like, okay, tell me more. But it is definitely a little bit of a shock factor. I think the more we can get away from that, the better. I don't think that it should be a topic of conversation in every conversation because there are plenty of elite athletes out there that don't. But I think for the ones that have already told their story and who have talked about it or who are open to talking about it, I agree. Like, talk about how you perhaps go to therapy so that you feel great going into your golf round, not that you're reacting to a bad golf round. That's where I think that narrative is great because it's less of that like, wow, blah, 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 broke down on the golf course and now he needs to go like figure out why it happened. It's like, let's talk about why figuring out good mental tactics ahead of the game makes someone do better on the weekend than they would have if they hadn't.
Yeah.
One thing we care deeply about is having people with lived athlete experience in decision-making roles. So how does your background as an athlete influence the questions that you ask when evaluating strategy or partnerships in your job?
Yeah, I think it starts with the prep work. Just like a game plan when you're leading into a big match or a big race. I try to spend time ahead of meetings or ahead of any work that's being done, really thinking about what's the plan of attack based on who's going to be in the room, who's the opponent, who are the stakeholders. B, understanding where you really need to dig in versus not. C, what are the goals of the meeting? And D, like, what are the next steps? And honestly, I think that if you walk into a meeting or anything that you're doing work-wise prepared and you've done the training and you've done that prep work, you're going to be successful. And I think that's something that as an athlete has influenced me every single day in work. Understanding coming out of a meeting, just like coming out of a game or a race, what next steps are, how do you improve, and how do you get what you need out of it? Maybe a post-game huddle is needed. Try to find the time. Go find the people who are in the room that you need to huddle up with. I think there's so many parallels between preparation for a race or a game and preparation for your work. It's amazing. And so I always think about that pregame plan and what we used to do as athletes. And I think about the same thing for my work and setting up well for strategies and for potential deal making.
So what you're basically saying is focusing on process, on the goal setting, and on those action items to actually get there matters, and that the end result will happen assuming you focus on this part.
100%.
Yeah, awesome.
Now, to go off of that, like, how important is it for media companies to have former athletes involved at the strategic level?
I mean, I'm not going to say that every hire needs to be an elite athlete because at the end of the day, it's important to have balance. And I do think there's beauty in having a lot of different types of people represented in a room. But I do think there's something special about having people who understand what it means to be an athlete, who've been in it, who've experienced everything that an athlete experiences. And so much of that does translate to business on a day-to-day basis, especially in sports media when you're talking about sports deals. I think there's something great about having people who, really get the sport or have been passionate about the sport or who have watched the sport. That makes you so much more effective when negotiating deals or trying to, improve or hit upon goals for a sports media company.
Absolutely love that answer. Like, if you had an athlete listening right now that was thinking about their next steps when they might not be continuing in sport and moving into business or media, what advice would you give them?
I do talk to a lot of people coming out of college or looking for internships or full-time jobs. Two pieces of advice I give. For those that do want to work in sports specifically, I tell them the same thing. Don't just say, I want to work in sports. Say why you want to work in sports. Say what part of sports interests you. You would be absolutely surprised at the percentage of people I talk to that just say, I want to work in sports. I don't care what part. It's so important to sit back, whether it's a day, a week, a month, however long it takes, to understand what it is about sports that you love and be able to articulate that. When you're going in for an entry-level position or an internship or anything, talk about why you like it. Talk about why you like media and why, as an athlete, do you think that it's the right fit for you? Because not only is it important to understand that to make sure that's why you want to go in, but from an external perspective, that's what a boss is going to want to understand. And secondarily, there is so much going on in the sports business and the sports media landscape, even just the media landscape in general. It's fast moving, it's fast paced. Be able to talk about it, read the trades, read every morning, wake up, whether it's a newsletter, know what's going on in the sports media landscape and be able to say, oh, I saw that MLB deal that happened the other day, or, oh, I saw what's going on in the RSM landscape. Being able to just talk and show that you understand it goes a very long way when it comes to trying to get into sports. It's an industry that people really want to get into. Many people, again, would take any job that they can, but make yourself stand out by doing those two things.
So, question for you. What is your reading list? Is it the Sports Business Journal? Is it just ESPN.com? Where are you going to like get your morning feed?
Yeah, I think I tend to err towards kind of the business publications like SBJ, Front Office Sports, like those.
Okay.
What I find is I try to read, a handful of them in the morning. Many of the same headlines will pop up, but perhaps they're a different take or a different opinion that I may not have picked up anywhere else. I will, I have the alerts on my phone. I have almost all the sports apps because, again, I like to see where the news is falling and what the opinions are. But in the morning, my first read is those business articles that are talking about not just what the deal is, but what the implications are for the leagues, for the athletes, for the media companies. And that's when I think you really, really start to understand kind of what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I really appreciate when I read the Sports Business Journal or Front Office Sports and I see a mental health related topic come up. And then I'm like, okay, we're relevant. This is happening.
Absolutely.
What has golf, because you're apparently a golf junkie, I love that. What has it taught you about frustration, self-talk, and expectations?
A lot. I always joke as someone that, yes, I am golf obsessed, that a day on the golf course anywhere is better than a day anywhere else. And yes, I recognize that's not 100% true for everyone and otherwise, but I grew up playing a lot of golf with my father, and I still do to this day. He's just gotten through his second knee replacement, and I can't wait to see the Bionic Man back out on the course.
Nice.
But he is a remarkably calm and even-keeled golfer. And he'll hit a bad shot, he'll shake it off, take some anger out on the next drive, bomb it down the middle, and back to having fun. And it is unbelievable. And so growing up playing with him, I was like, I want to be like him. Now, in practice, that's not so easy. We've all been there. You're cruising through. It's a great round. And then boom, blow up hole. And you're kind of like, okay, I forgot how to play golf. And then the frustration sets in. And unsurprisingly, for many, and probably for most, especially if you were having a great round, the round's ruined. And how sad is that when you think about it? The amount of money we spend to play golf, the amount of trips we do, we get on planes, and it's like you let one bad moment ruin it. And I hate to say you let it, but we all do kind of let it. And so what I've learned in my experience playing with my dad and also just trying to remember that golf is fun is just to put everything in perspective and remind yourself of that. One bad hole, temporary breakdown doesn't mean it's the end of the world, but everybody needs to find their own way to recover, right? Whether that's self-talk, whether that's breathing exercises, whether that's saying to the person next to you, hey, can you give me a swing tip? Like, what did I do on that? Which some people hate, some people love. I don't know. But the point being that what I've learned is everything's different for other people. You learn in your own way to cope with, the frustration and setting your own expectations. I think that's why golf is such a great example of how mental health feeds into everybody's round in their own way. And same goes for your own personal life, for your work life. Like, you're never going to get it done 100% of the time. There are speed bumps, but you have to figure out your own way to make it work. And I think it's just a great metaphor for life and getting through tough times.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Out of curiosity, does golf scratch the same itch for you that rowing once did as far as like being competitive?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's interesting because they are two very different sports, right? For anyone who knows everything about rowing and everybody who's ever played golf, they are completely different. But there are two very important parallels that I think have made it so that golf has effectively replaced it as the sport that I get my competitive energy out. The first is that it's hard to win, like outright win in either sport. Think about golf, right? You are an individual in a field of however many players on the PGA Tour. Even Scotty, even the best players out there don't win every single week, which for those of us who like to win, it's really hard. Rowing's the same way. In the head of the Charles, you could be up against 75 boats competing for first place. It is so hard. So if you're a competitive athlete, to go win is really, really tricky. So that's the first thing. And I think what that does is make you competitive week after week, round after round. You're like, I want to win. I want to win. In other sports, you got a 50-50 shot. If you're doing if you're playing basketball, you're playing hockey, you're winning or you're losing. Golf and rowing, you really, really got to work at it. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is the technicalities that exist within both sports.
Yeah.
Golf is such a technical sport. Wrong grip, wrong backswing, whatever it is, you hosel the ball. It just has such an impact on your success that there's a strive for perfection. You are always looking for something that you can improve. I got to go to the range and I got to work on this. And then the next day it's like, I got to go to the green and I got to work on that. For all of us golfers, it never all comes together. There's always something. So it's hard to be perfect, but it all comes down to technicalities. In rowing, same thing. It is such a technical sport. It's how your oar hits the water. It's how you come through. It's how you break your knees. It's whether you're in sync with the person in front of you. Any one of those goes wrong, and your stroke is not as effective as it could be. So there is a constant strive for that perfection, a lot of it driven by the technicalities. So I think golf, in a weird way, despite it being a very different sport, has been a really good replacement for me to get my competitive energy out.
Amazing.
I mean, you just drew so many parallels that I did not see coming.
What, you didn't think rowing and golf were similar?
I mean, the word stroke is involved, but that's about all I got.
That's a good call out, Mark. I like a game of strokes. There you go.
Yep.
We could do a documentary next if you want.
We might
Let's
have
do
to.
it.
Hey, we could get some good golfers in. We could get some good rowers in. I'm in. I love this. Get rowers on the golf course, golfers in the rowing boat.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be, more friendly if the golfers were, rowing.
Scotty, Spieth, and DeChambeau all on the same boat. Okay. I wonder who's going to be the motor on that one. Yeah. All right. Lightning round, buddy.
Yeah, no, great time for a lightning round. So going back to golf, walking or riding?
Riding, unless it's a really nice course, then I want to walk and really experience it.
All right. Match play or stroke play?
Match play. You can shake off a bad hole.
Range session or on-course scramble?
Oh, on-course scramble. I'm like any chance you get to go out on the course.
Yeah, that's fair.
For me, it's like any chance that I can do a scramble would be great, so I don't have to play against myself.
That's great too.
Harder mentally, stroke seat or 5-footer to save par?
Stroke seat. You literally have 8 people relying on you, like for the entire race to set the rhythm. I'm not saying that a putt isn't important, but I'm going stroke seat all the way.
What's the best mental skill golf has taught you?
Finding perspective and remembering that like golf is fun. And if you have one bad hole, shake it off and move on.
Okay. And then best mental skill rowing has taught you?
That when you're in a lot of pain and things feel like they're just going to break, leverage that resilience and know that there's always another stroke that you can take. Like at the end of the day, your body will get you through it. Your mind will get you through it. Don't give up and just push through.
We found the title of the episode. There's always another stroke that you can take. Last one. Favorite course you've played or dream course still on the list?
I mean, dream course Augusta. No other answer. I just played TBC, the championship course, ahead of players, which was really fun.
The stadium was up?
Yeah, stadium was up, and so we didn't get to play off those tees, but it was so fun. I played with a great group, some of my best friends who live down in Ponte Vedra, and it was so awesome. It was just, we had a blast.
That's surreal.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So Tim didn't jump in the water for you to distract you?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
checking.
next time maybe.
Okay. Last one. So you're standing over a must-make putt. What is the one thought you don't want in your head?
Oh, can I answer this and also give a very quick anecdote because it's tied to exactly what I don't want to?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. What I would not want to think is, what happens if I don't make this putt? I literally, not not kidding. My first time, so I belong to a small club in upstate New York, and I was last year. My husband and I joined, or we joined a couple years ago. But I played in my first path, to play in the club championship, and I was playing on the 18th hole to tie it to go into playoff to ultimately make it into the club championship, and I had a short putt, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man. Well, what happens if I don't make this putt? And I was just thinking about everything after. I wasn't thinking about the putt, and I missed the putt and didn't make it into the final. And so that one will scar me for a long time. And I learned, I did play last summer. So the next year I made the putt to win in the playoff, to make it into the final. I didn't win the final, but we learned from our previous year. And I will just say that one putt haunted me for a very long time.
Well, and it sounds like you're going to win this year.
Oh my goodness. I don't know. We've got some really, really, really strong women.
Okay.
So
In the next
I got my work cut out.
next 3 to 5 years.
I need to get some lessons.
All right. So looking forward, where do you think sports media has the biggest opportunity to make a positive impact on mental health?
I think something that will be really important is letting the athletes tell their story and then following on with context and letting this, as sports media companies kind of building around that. I think that it's really important to kind of let the coverage seem genuine, let it come from the athletes, and kind of let people empathize with the stars when it comes directly from them. So I think that's really important. And then fold on media coverage, fold in the experts. I think we talked about not trying to make it kind of too many medical terms or otherwise, but I think bringing in experts is also really important. And so I really believe there's an opportunity to make it feel natural, to make it feel authentic, and to make it something that fans really resonate with. And I truly believe that starts with the athlete. And that's something that I think, golf has been great about. I think opening up narrative to things about resources and sports psychologists and therapy and things that are available to everyone, not just elite athletes, makes it a little bit more real that, hey, these elite athletes are using resources that are also available to you, and to help encourage those that might be in need. And it might be a part of your normal day, and steer away from, that idea that you're weak if you need therapy, or you're weak if you need to seek out resources. I think we can really do a good job collectively of kind of getting rid of that narrative. But look, I think balance is everything. And I don't think you want to make the entire narrative about, mental health, but I think finding that really, really kind of good, genuine way of folding it in is great, and including it so that it's more than just in crisis moments. And as we talked about, more on a regular basis, I think will really help with that.
I mean, what you just basically said is the unsaid Trojan horse about what we're trying to do, which is if we can get the conversation normalized in macho sports related to mental health, that can have a wonderful trickle down to the rest of society.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Thank you.
I mean, there's so much strength to be seen and acknowledged in understanding your vulnerabilities. Everybody has that one shot that they don't have in their bag, or whatever it may be, if we're relating it back to golf. And that's not so different from what's going on in your head. And working with someone, a coach that can help you get through that hurdle is just invaluable. And not spending the time to try to exercise those options is, I feel, not an option anymore. So, Celia, with all of this, what gives you the most hope when you look at where the space is headed, mental health and sport?
I spend a lot of time thinking about the younger generations, our future, the people who are going to be stepping into the jobs that we all stepped in however many years ago. I think it's the new people who are training to become elite athletes, the newer people who are kind of training to become the next leaders of businesses. I think the more that we can kind of get this content out on the platforms, getting the athletes out there and continuing to do what they're doing and reaching that younger generation, I think will be really impactful. We've talked about trying to reduce stigma. We've talked about trying to change the narrative away from elite athletes are weak if they need help. And I think reaching those younger generations is going to be really important, because I think right now there's a lot of that going on in middle schools, in high schools, amongst athletes who are under pressure from just the systems that they're in to be incredible athletes. I think the more that younger generation can see the elite athletes leveraging resources and help, I think the better. And I truly think that is going to continue happening. And I think that's what gives me hope. I think we're already starting to see it with companies like you guys. I mean, you guys are doing tremendous work, and you have this incredible sense of what's needed out there. And I think the more that gets out there, the more we're helping the younger generations, and can hopefully try to slow down this build of stress and concerns and societal pressures. So I am very hopeful. As I said, you guys are such a huge part of that. And I'm so excited to have been a part of this, because I'm very passionate about it. But I feel hopeful about the future.
Amazing.
Wow.
Well, Celia, this has been like really fun. I know that you're a personal friend of Tim. I appreciate you taking your time. It's been a really thoughtful conversation. You bring a rare perspective. Like, you're not just a media executive, but you're someone who truly understands athletes, because you were one.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just really grateful that you're able to bring this athlete first lens into the rooms that you're in. It's truly a game changer for all of us.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Celia. And to all of our listeners, if you care about sports, media, and mental health, this is exactly where those worlds meet. Till next time on the Peak Sports Psychiatry Podcast, thank you.